Hi everybody, welcome to this Hive Talk. Today Ross and I wanted to talk about the Practice Buyer's Guide. So it's something we wrote probably about 18 months ago, and actually a lot of the content is still, and if not even more relevant to people looking to purchase, even in quite a changed market. So what we wanted to do today is maybe add a little bit more nuance to some of the areas we're talking about, but as we're seeing a significant uptick in associates looking to buy at the moment, we're probably getting about, I don't know, 4 or 5 people a month contacting us thinking about it. It's really a time to actually reflect on the buyer's guide and think about how to get most from the practice purchase. So Ross and I are going to talk through it. And if you've got any questions afterwards, give us an email and we can arrange a call to speak through with you one-on-one.
Yeah, please do download the guide. It's free to everyone. I think probably the bit I'd say is that the reason we wrote it, and actually the reason we created a program to help associates or even practice owners if they're looking to buy another practice, was that we found the same kind of advice kept on recurring, and actually we found that the advice that we're able to give is so much more valuable before you've bought the practice than 6 months after you bought the practice. So it's evergreen for wherever you might be in the process, and whether it's your first or your second practice. But we'd much rather kind of give the good quality advice before the problems occur rather than after them.
Yeah, I think Ross and I mainly used to work with practice owners just on how to develop their business, and we kind of noticed every year we're getting quite a few people coming to us who'd owned a practice for 2 years, and we're kind of picking up the phone saying, I'm not earning any money, I don't really know what to do, I feel a bit trapped. And the story was similar enough for us to actually put some thought into it and kind of realize that actually you need to know why you'd buy a business before you own the business, and then have to learn on the fly. So hopefully this is helpful to you. I think even if you've got a practice already, it's probably it'll be interesting to get your views on it as well. But firstly, Ross, the first thing we always ask, which is often not what people want to answer, is why would someone buy a practice? Why do they want to buy a practice? So why do we ask that?
Well, I think there's practice ownership. I think there's perhaps a mistaken belief it's a golden goose. They can be genuinely, but it's not as if you write out the ticket to buy the practice and you automatically get that success. So there's an investment cycle to go through quite usually, and that could be financial investment, but it's definitely an emotional and energy investment process. And you still can get the returns even in a post-COVID world. Private practices are booming, but you have got to kind of be prepared to develop it and nurture it, and so you kind of have a really clear vision of why you're doing it in the first place. I think that what we're really concerned about is there's people out there who want to secure themselves a job, and I think that's a dangerous motive to go into practice ownership on. So we try and strip it back to the reasons behind and the motivations, because I think it will serve you in good stead then. If you can come up with the right answer for the years that you'll be at the helm of your practice.
Yeah, one of the most common reasons we hear people want to buy a practice is actually quite often clinically focused. They want some clinical freedom and to do the dentistry they want to do, and it's not that that's a bad reason. But it won't pay your debt repayment for you, for example. So very, very quickly, it will become much more about running the business than any kind of views you've got on the dentistry you want to do. Otherwise, it'll kind of overtake you, and you'll be in a position where you don't have any choices at all. So what we try and do, and what we recommend anyone thinking of buying does, is really kind of dig down as to why you're doing it, and try and not have it as something amorphous as I want some autonomy, because you will have a certain kind of day-to-day autonomy, but you'll be accountable to the bank, you'll be accountable to your staff, you'll be accountable to your patients in a way that doesn't really occur in an associate's world. So yeah, we probably take a bit of time to actually tell people that being an associate's a really good job, that pays really, really well. And in terms of administrative sides of it, it's fairly low stress, would you say, Ross? Or
Yeah,
not the dentist, luckily.
I was going to say, it's that you know, there is I think there's always a human nature to desire to control your surroundings, and you know, fair to say as an associate you don't control everything, you absolutely don't, but I'm not sure you control more as a practice owner. I think you just control slightly different things. There are certainly a whole load more things that you don't control, and it's whether that trade-off that you've made there, whether you've swapped the ones that you didn't control before for new ones that you don't control now. I hope I'm not being a bit too kind of ambiguous there, but you know, you're not going to be able to control your customers. You're not going to be able to control the macroeconomic market. You know, we've just been given a massive warning as to what can happen with items outside of your control. So yeah, I don't think you're ever really, you know, it's not as if you're kind of upping your controlometer. You're just swapping some parts that you do and don't control for other ones that you do and don't.
Yeah. And it's much harder to change once you own a business. So if you have an associate role that you don't like, it's much easier to move around. Once you've got business, you are tied in for some period of time. So there isn't, it's kind of low risk in the sense you're probably not going to lose a load of money, but it is a demanding project. Probably one of the first thing that people ask us when they get in contact with us is, can I get finance for a practice? And you know, there's obvious reasons why they want to know if they can get funding to do it. It's kind of it's not the best question. There's usually a way of getting finance, and it's a bit scruffy and you kind of really have to dig around to figure it out. But that shouldn't be the only kind of gateway that you're trying to get through to practice purchase. It's not, could I buy this practice? It's much more about should. So we've spent a lot of time trying to actually speak to people much earlier on, even before they've found a practice, actually particularly before they've found a practice, to explore what their career pathway they want. So it's not what everyone always wants to hear, because it's quite exciting to acquire a practice. But equally, I do think it's one of those that if you take the time now, it'll kind of serve you much better in the future.
Well, it's quite exciting, I think. It's a bit like searching for a new house. You find the house and it looks good, and you know you can envisage and see how you're going to live in it. And I think there's that tangibility when you've got that, you know, that brochure that might come along from Christie's or something, and it's, oh, look at it, you know, it's got a third surgery plumbed in as well, you know, this is and it's, you know, it's within commuting distance, and I do kind of get that, but equally in terms of all the things that you do need to know when you're running a business, there's benefit to having that knowledge earlier, wouldn't you say, Dan?
Yeah, it's because there's so many pathways. What you should know as dentists is you're in one of the best industries you can be in. So if you start thinking early enough about, well, we tend to measure things by indices of income. So what you get paid on a monthly basis, wealth, what your asset portfolio is, time. So how you actually deploy your time, how much time you're committing, when you want to do something. And the one that often gets overlooked is gratification. So if you start earlier on in your career, kind of figuring out how you want to make your trade-offs, because one, if you're not so precious over your time, but really want a lot of income, you can probably work 6 days as an associate and earn a really great load of money. That's not for everyone. When we start our careers, we actually understand this a bit more, because as dentists, you chose to go to university, which was a trade of your time to increase your income potential. So you got a qualification which allowed you not to be on £10 an hour, but to be on £100 an hour. So it's all kind of stuff that there's systems and structures in society to help us to do. But then when you're kind of on your own as an associate, as a dentist, it's important to start thinking about it earlier on. Now, one of those options would be buying a practice. But if you were really just interested in being the best dentist possible, it's probably not the best choice to buy a practice, because you'll have way more distractions in your world, I suppose. That would be one of the biggest things.
You're probably still working 6 days a week. You're just not working them all chairside.
Yeah.
I don't know whether that's a convenient truth as well, but I'm sure, you know, if there's any practice owners watching this, I'm sure they're probably all kind of chuckling a little bit at this moment in time. Big, you know, again, it's probably not what people want to hear. Sounds like we're trying to make an anti-sales video here to warn you off practice ownership. I do want it to kind of stress it's more about going into it eyes wide open more than anything.
Yeah. Yeah, well, I think also all the voices you'll hear in the marketplace want you to buy. So if you're speaking to someone who sells dental practices, funnily enough, they want you to buy a dental practice from them. There's nothing kind of malevolent about that. That's their job. So much like if you go and see an orthodontist, they'll probably suggest you need braces. If you need them, obviously. If you don't, they'd be ethical as well. But you kind of understand that there's no one acting on your, what we'd call your kind of shareholder interests. So if we understood that actually you just want to really kind of get expert at an area of dentistry, say implants, and you want to do that, but you also want to create asset value, there's loads of ways of doing it which don't involve basically becoming a business owner, having to manage a team of 10 plus people, having to deal with patients that are kicking off, having to deal with all these different annoying things that exist. And you still get the outcomes you want. On the other side of that, if it sounds really exciting to actually have a business, to have something that you're steering, and the fact that it is inherently chaotic. So even the best dental businesses we know still have an element of firefighting, because you're dealing with people at the end of the day, and you're dealing with a kind of macro situation which no one could have predicted, and there's not really anything you can do much about apart from react, adapt and capitalize on, which some people love, but some people really don't. So it's really kind of getting to the bottom of what you want your career to be like, and before you commit to buying a dental practice.
Well, these are all things that can be nurtured over time as well, but you know, it doesn't give you a huge amount of time to nurture those hidden ingredients when you know, you're 3 weeks prior to buying your practice, and then you decide you need to kind of learn about finances, or you know, whatever the kind of the thread might be. It's you know, arguably you should have started that 12 months earlier, and you know, you've got a nice kind of running head start at things there. The analogy I always use is, you know, if you're running a 400-meter race, you know, you don't turn up to the starting line and then put your shoes on and then limber up. You know, what you want to be doing is start that process, you know, an hour or so earlier, so that when you're on the starting blocks, you are in the prime position to launch out of those blocks as quickly as possible. And you know, it's a really good analogy in terms of owning a practice, because as soon as you get the keys, you want to be sprinting as fast as you can and developing and nurturing it for you know, to offset probably the you know, the £1 million you might have spent on the thing.
Yeah, there is, whenever you do financial modeling on any practice you're going to purchase, because of the price of dental practices, there will be, and we can elaborate in more detail if we have some time with you one-on-one, but essentially you will have to grow that practice to make any money. We can almost guarantee that with any practice. It's just the way it's going to be. So unless you're interested in growing, and the quicker you grow it, the better, obviously. So unless that's an exciting thing, that you've got to buy a business to fundamentally change it and make it larger. It's kind of figuring out if that's the right path for you.
I think there's a bit of a fallacy, and you know, I hope maybe that you buy the 1 in 100 practice that's uniquely profitable in the position you buy it, but actually 99 times out of 100, you know, the revenue just doesn't support. Revenue is different to profit. I suppose that's the point there. And you know, if you've got £1,000 of revenue coming into the practice, by the time you've paid the clinician and you know, all the overheads of the practice, your profit margin might be 5% at best. And I can almost kind of hear you screaming again, how can that be? You know, there's £1,000 coming in, I pay my associate 45%, I've got some lab fees. The trouble is there's loads of other overhead costs in the practice, and most practices are not at a critical mass level. We know that because we've modeled hundreds of them. But the metric I always use to kind of encapsulate things is it costs it costs a private practice on average about £550 to open a surgery each day. So, if you kind of bake that in and annualize it, you will see that it does require a dental practice to be at critical mass point before you start earning that profit. And now you can earn the profits, but you do have to kind of reach that tipping point. And I suppose that's what Dan's alluding to there, where you might acquire a practice and seek to grow it. Fairly kind of bluntly, what we're trying to do is move it past that tipping point into a location where it can be profitable, where you're earning your revenue. And it's not normally to start with. And I don't know whether that's kind of bursting the bubble for a lot of people, but what we're really trying to capture there is genuine profit for you to compensate for all the risk that you're assuming when you're writing out that check for £1 million.
I think that's it. That we obviously talk about profitability and money quite a bit, and that can't be the sole purpose of the business, because you'll end up making strange decisions if you just focused on. Well, you make a lot of bad decisions if you just focus on profitability and not thinking strategically. But it is important, if you want to do a philanthropic venture, there are much cheaper and easier ways of doing it, where you take on much less risk personally.
You shouldn't not think about it. And you probably also shouldn't believe that because you're paid a salary, that's the same thing as profit.
Yeah. So there's loads of kind of watch outs that we're putting out there, and we're not trying to talk you out of it. We're just trying to open your eyes before you do it, because frankly, it's probably one of the best places to put your money if you're looking for an entrepreneurial venture. Because actually, if we talk about a few of the upsides, dentistry, even in the kind of macroeconomic context we've got, is still booming. The best practices we work with are doing actually much better than pre-COVID, and there's a good reason for that. That there's a scarcity of dentistry being delivered in the UK because of the NHS, and some smaller private practices are struggling to figure out how to see their patients. So bigger, kind of more sales and marketing focused practices are soaking them up. So there's tons of growth out there. So there's probably few businesses that I can confidently say that you can buy and double the revenue of 3 to 5 years, and actually sell at maybe 3 times the price you bought it. That doesn't really happen in other industries. But the difficulty you've got to get your head around is you've got to pay a really high entry price. So the ticket for entry is really expensive, which means you need to be much more switched on running the business. There's no kind of, I'm going to get in there, I'm going to get my feet under the table, kind of, and just figure out how things work.
Well, you can, but you're just pushing that starting point 6 or 12 months into the future.
Yeah. You probably, there's very few. I think I've seen a couple more practices with the events of last year that are actually probably going to be in some serious financial straits. But generally speaking, the business will survive. The person who'll pay the price is you as the owner. So your income will probably just be significantly lower than it should be, and you'll probably be working very hard. So that's the kind of trade-off that happens there. But if you go in with a plan, honestly, the opportunity in dentistry is huge. It's really, really big. But you won't achieve it by being the best dentist. You'll achieve it by being the best business person.
So, we developed a plan essentially, Dan, didn't we, to help kind of hold people's hands through that process. But so, genuinely, if you're thinking about buying practice, we'd love you to make contact. I think we can seriously help you out. Probably the emphasis I'd make is that plan should start probably not 3 weeks prior to you signing contracts, because you can leak any number of kind of losses along the way, even whether that's tax planning or the skill set that you're going to need. It's much better to start. Well, what would you recommend?
I honestly, once you've got to the point where you're established as an associate, so you're very confident in the associate role, it's probably a time to stop looking inward about what you're doing and just getting confident in the clinical position. And it's the time to start looking outward, because even if we kind of decide at this point in time that practice ownership isn't the right idea, there's a lot of things, particularly on the wealth element and kind of personal development element, that you should probably be considering as well earlier on. So I'd say the earlier the better, but the kind of the caveat there being, you know, get good at what you do, learn your trade, then it's the time to look out again. But wherever you are, you know, we're always open for a conversation. So if you're a qualifying dentist as well, do get in contact and we can probably give you some pointers as well.
Lovely. Thank you very much, everyone, for listening us through to this point, if you made it this far.
Cheers. Thanks, guys. See ya.